Well, as our attendees continue to roll in here, 2:30, you all are joining us for the National Preparedness webinar series here. Great panel of experts, certainly individuals I respect and hold in high regard. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of them. So we'll wait a few more minutes. I know we got a little late on the live button there, and we'll see. We'll get to people's questions and talk a little about preparedness. Thankfully, we are recording this webinar, so we're going to make sure that it's available for replay and distribution. So anyone has any questions or comments about that, look for a follow-up email that will certainly be sent out. All right, guys. Well, it's 2:34, so we'll wait another 30 seconds at 2:35, and then we'll start talking here. All right, let's get going. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, and I am joined by our panelists to talk about the National Preparedness Month. National Preparedness Month, obviously a topic that is always top of mind being here in South Florida. However, obviously we have a lot of other distractions out there, the 40 recertification and a few other things that are impacting our local marketplace. But we can't forget about being prepared. We can't forget about the hurricane season. Right now, I was just looking at the NOAA to see what the latest and update was right as we started this broadcast. And I'm seeing 3 areas of interest, and we have Nicholas there still churning over the looks like Louisiana at the current moment. So again, these storms, obviously the Gulf area has been very active, and the Atlantic seems to continue to churn up areas of interest. So we want to continue to make sure that we're staying top of mind and that we are participating in the preparedness, whether we're board members, whether we're association unit owners, whatever it may be. You should be familiar with your preparedness plan for your community association. So without further ado, I want each of the panelists to introduce themselves, talk a little about their company. Mr. Wallick, with Best Roofing, why don't you kick it on off?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Best Roofing, we've been in business since 1978. We're a commercial roofing contractor. Our main office is in Fort Lauderdale. We have an office in Miami, and we service the Palm Beach area out of our Fort Lauderdale office. We have been around for a long time and have a very good team of people that we've all worked together for quite some time. We're a family business, like a lot of our businesses. We have about 250 employees, and we've serviced primarily the Tri-County area and have been, like I said, since 1978. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. And just as I wanted to make a plug here that we will be posting all of the contact information for each of the panelists inside the chat function. So just make sure you check for that. Let's move on to Alan.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Gucovschi. I'm the co-founder and COO at ONR. Some of you know us for ONR. We've been around for 2 years, and our main mission is community management. There's a lot of property management software out there. We're focused on community management software. So I'm excited to be here today. Preparedness has to do a lot with communications, making sure that your community can communicate when things are not right, and taking your community digital is certainly the way to go. So thanks for having me. We're excited to be here. Currently, we're servicing north of 150 associations in South Florida, and we're excited for the opportunity to showcase today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Alan. Ray.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. My name is Ray Nunez. I am a regional director with Castle Management. My responsibilities include managing portfolio accounts predominantly in the Broward area. For those of you that don't know Castle Group is a property management company that's been around for the last 30 years, managing condominiums and homeowners associations throughout the state of Florida, as far south as Key Largo, as far north as Jacksonville. And we've also branched out into parts of Texas as well. And we're here to provide our expertise to any community associations that need a full service property management solution.
Thank you, Ray. And Chad, thanks for taking some time from the beach there to join us. Go ahead, my man.
Early weekend, right, everybody?
Exactly. Feeling that
So,
Friday vibe.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Never mind the train in the background. That's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Chad Mackey. I'm the chief engineer and ops manager for Driveway Maintenance Inc. Here headquartered in Miami. We have a sales office out of Fort Lauderdale. We service the Tri-County area. We have a full service paving operation out of Orlando and Tampa as well. So we pretty much cover the state of Florida. Everything from asphalt pavement construction and maintenance, concrete pavement construction and maintenance, ADA upgrades, signage, striping, large and small, anything to do with post-construction site work. That's kind of what our specialty is. The company's been in business since 1971 under the same ownership, and I'm entering my 12th year here as our engineer, and couldn't be happier. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thanks for joining us, Chad. And we're hearing from a few that the link to the webinar was, some people are having some issues with it. So I know we're sorting through that. Thank you for those that have and made the effort to be here with us, and hopefully that gets corrected here soon. But without further ado, I want to introduce myself again, Dan Odess with GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery. We've managed more than $1 billion in recovery. We primarily represent community associations and loss and damage claims either made on a first party or third party basis. That's everything from your hurricane claims, which is relevant to this topic, to your construction damage losses, whether from on-site or nearby construction projects. So I want to get into some of the topics here, some of the important things, and I want to start out with just talking some general things, being the insurance coverage experts and someone that has been on the front lines quite a bit. Obviously, you always want a good reminder about making sure that you take care of things at home in order to help your association, meaning that if you don't prepare at home with the right food and water and your generator and fuel and everything else, it's going to be a little bit difficult to respond to the needs of your community association. So while you're preparing the community association for its disaster, if one were to occur, it's really, really important that you also are taking care of things at home. It's almost, I've learned that some property managers get so wrapped up in what they're doing for the community association, they leave everything at home to the last minute. And next thing you know, they don't have the supplies they need when that event does occur. So make sure that we are taking care of things at home. But I want to ask, go back to Gregg here and start talking a little bit about roofs, because there is definitely one person that knows most about roofs, and that is Gregg. I've gotten the opportunity to sit through a lot of his CE classes and learn from Gregg over the years about the different things that we should be doing. So Gregg, let's talk about inspections, a little bit about planning. Obviously, the key point of the title list is preparation. What are the needs, the inspection needs in the planning phase for hurricane season? And since we are in the crux of the most active part of the storm season, what should the associations be doing as part of that inspection process?
Well, even if you didn't have a hurricane threats, you need to be inspecting your roof on an annualized basis here. The things that you really need to pay attention to is to make sure you don't have any loose objects up on the roof. A lot of times people will, especially like units that have air conditioning units or chillers or cell towers or any sort of mechanical equipment up on top of the roof, a lot of times activity is taking place there and there'll be loose debris. That flying debris can just be disastrous for a roof if it starts tumbling across the roof. So, you want to make sure that you don't have anything that's not properly secured and tied off your roof. Really, that should be any time of the year. Perimeter attachment is the most critical component. Roofs never blow off from the center. They always blow off from the edge. Your corners are going to be your most vulnerable part. That's where you have the highest wind uplift, and especially on a high rise where you will have a wind coming into the building, and then when it hits that wall and it goes up that wall, when it hits the top of that wall, it creates a really huge negative pressure, and that's where the roof gets sucked off usually. So you want to make sure that you have your perimeters attached properly. As you said before, I mean, it's all about preparation, because once a storm hits, there's really nothing you can do. And Dan, I really want to echo what you talked about, being prepared, not just your unit, being prepared with your family, having everything in its place. One of the things that we run into after a storm is we can't do anything unless we get our workforce back. So, make sure, and you should have planning within our organizations to just make sure that you're in a position to get everybody safe during a storm. Like we open up, we have a category 5 building. We make our building available for people to actually stay in, just to make sure that, everybody is safe. But I would encourage everybody to just kind of overdo it when it comes to taking care of your people and making sure that they are okay, because without them, you can't respond and get back. So.
No, I think it's great advice, and particularly coming from a business owner, right? You're Greg, you're a business owner, and now you're talking about basic business functions too. So, I've been talking a lot on our, we do a recovery report every Thursday, and one of the things we've been talking about is starting to treat these community associations when you're managing them like businesses, right? So part of that planning is making sure that the people themselves are taking care of the things they need to in their own personal lives, so that you can continue to operate your business. And that just goes the same thing with the community association. Something that's probably not talked about a lot, and something that a lot of people probably don't look at much, is their driveways, right? We're preparing for a storm. So I want to talk a little bit about this issue, because I know this is actually something that's impacted one of my own buildings. I own a commercial building in Alapata, and it was an issue with the drainage systems around it. So Chad, I want to bring you into the conversation and talk about what do you got to do for your driveways, for your parking lots or your garages, in order to prepare for these storms.
Yeah, thank you. And really good information, Greg. You obviously have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in this industry, being down here for so long and being through so many preparations for storms that either didn't hit or did. We always hope for the former. So a lot of people don't really consider it, but especially down here in South Florida, where you have a lot of vegetation, you have a lot of beautiful trees on these properties. First and foremost, before I get into the storm sewers, make sure you guys are having a good, solid maintenance plan, not just for roof inspections, but for trimming and pruning your trees. If trees are pruned properly, they allow hurricane force winds to flow through them better, and that leads to less debris, less power outages, a lot of things that we can avoid ahead of time just by doing those preventative maintenance measures, spending that little bit of extra money and extra time protecting the landscaping, and it actually helps the trees flourish and grow long term. If you don't, or even if you do, our storm sewers are kind of a vast system that we don't really see, especially in larger communities and larger commercial properties. You may have thousands of linear feet of underground storm sewer piping and several storm sewer inlets that are capturing water. Well, they not only capture water, they capture muck, sand, dirt, debris, leaves. Everything that can flow in any given rainstorm comes into those storm sewers. And without velocity, that stuff just builds up within the system. And so a lot of times you'll have properties, if you haven't maintained your storm sewers, if you haven't done proper flushing and vacuuming, making sure your inlets are at capacity, they're about sometimes even 30% of the actual running capacity. So if you can imagine, you've got a 12-inch pipe or an 18-inch pipe, and it's only got 30% of the capacity that it's supposed to have for the water to run through. And then you introduce a hurricane style rain event where you've got 2 inches per hour coming in a 6-hour time span. You're basically surcharging that system so much that it's not even designed to flow at maximum capacity for that type of event. So you're going to have some minor flooding during those events if the storm sewer is at full capacity. Now, multiply that by 100-fold when your system's running at 20% capacity because it's clogged and there's nowhere for that water to go. I've seen properties here after Irma. I went to a couple of properties that were 4 feet underwater, and you couldn't find the inlets if you tried at that point in time. And we had to dewater, we had to demuck, we had to get it down to where we could actually pull the lids off of the storm sewer, the inlet grates, and pump the water out of them just to be able to get to the debris. So trust me, it's not fun coming in after the fact and a flooded property and dealing with this stuff. So if you maintain, I would suggest semi-annually go in, vac and flush all of your storm sewer inlets and pipes And in the case of a storm event like this, you're going to have a much better flooding or less flooding scenario than you would if those things are filled with debris and muck.
All great points, particularly for preparing stuff you could do today. You know, we're having, you know, decent weather, but we have had major rain events. We've seen that most of the tropical storms and hurricanes that have come on shore in the United States as of today, most of them were rain events. There were more rain event than they were wind. So all really good, important information. And if you haven't noticed, there's been a lot more flash floodings lately that are unrelated to hurricanes. So everything that Chad just said is very important, particularly because we're just seeing a rise in the amount of flash flooding. We're seeing a rise in the amount of issues. And a lot of that starts on pool decks, but also in parking lots and parking structures and things like that. So very, very good preparation stuff, just really for the summertime, for the rainy season. And particularly now that we're right now in the most busy part of the storm season, you want to make sure you're doing this stuff. But as a unit owner, we see things all the time, right? Maybe we see a drain that's clogged. Maybe we see an issue with our roof. And there's this awesome technology out there, Owner app, which we've had the awesome opportunity to talk to many, many times about the abilities that one can have with this software on their phone and on a tablet. So I want to bring you into the conversation a little bit here to talk about, you know, and when it comes to preparing, Alan, what can associations do with your technology, or what should they be doing with technology in general to help with the preparing?
Awesome, Dan. Thanks so much for that. So the first thing that we need to think about, and I'll echo a little bit about what Chad and Greg said, by the time the storm hits, it's a little bit too late for that storm. You can always prepare better for the next one. We have to start thinking about the premise that a digital community is going to be better off in one of these catastrophes than one that is not digital. If you're depending solely on phone calls and paper snail mail to communicate with your membership, chances are you're not going to be in a good position to manage one of these tragedies. What we want is communities to be able to enable technology before, create a digital community where everyone is online already prior to the storm, and then it's going to be second nature for management and even the own community members to communicate amongst each other. So notifications are a big part of this, making sure that you can get to people via email and text. Think about text messaging as a very important option here, because chances are folks are not going to have access to their computers. Maybe some of them don't have access to their email if it's not within their computer. So if you don't have Wi-Fi, if you don't have electricity, you definitely want to rely on text messaging as well. Additionally, there is one component here, which is, to your point, making sure that the community works for itself and not against each other. Many times we're seeing members taking pictures of things that are wrong, and instead of opening up service requests with their management, they're going to social media. And no one's following up on social media. You can put in Facebook as much as you want that those drains are clogged. Chances are no one is going to follow up on it. Whereas if you have a centralized platform, the owners can report things back into the system and the management can actually have access to those. Maybe we're going to be in a better position to take care of the storm when it rolls in. So just echoing on what is said before, preparation is key. Start early, get your community online as quickly as you can, and make sure that you have a robust system that can leverage text messages as well to make sure you can communicate with everyone in the storm would be my advice starting there.
Yeah, and this is a solid advice. Obviously, we're seeing the use of technology become more and more important for community associations. We have industry leaders on this panel today, top-notch companies, top-notch professionals, but they're not always, right? And when a storm happens, maybe the person that you need to help you is not local, is not the professional you may think they are. And there's a lot to consider. And as property managers, there is a lot to consider. And so I'd like to get into a little bit about that as far as the preparation that goes from the property management perspective into that preparation, things that you're considering, things that you're looking for in vendors as we are, again, preparing for something, right? We're still preparing, even though we're in the middle of it, we're still preparing. So Ray, what are some of the things that a community association board and their manager should be considering right now as they're preparing?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we want to make sure that both from a management standpoint, the board, the residents, is that we're all being proactive, right? We need to have a plan in place so that we can address the situation when it occurs. So being proactive, proper planning, making sure that you have in Castle, we start our preparations for hurricane season early on in the year. By March, April, we're already coming up with our plan, making sure that's in place. Doing our preventive maintenance, as some of you have already talked about, making sure those storm drains are clear, making sure we're having the industry professionals going out there inspecting what needs to be inspecting. And then once our plan is in place, make sure that we go through the preparation as if a storm was coming tomorrow, right? Make sure you have all your supplies. Make sure that you do what we call your dry runs. Where is the furniture from the pool going to be stored in the event of a storm? Do we have all of our shutters, all of our nuts and bolts to be able to prepare our buildings, our HOA amenities in the event that a storm comes through? And also the communication. That's 100% key. Like Alan said, we need to make sure that we're communicating not only with our boards, but with our residents. What should they do to prepare? What are we doing to prepare to give them a comfort level that if a storm comes, we're all going to bear it together and make sure that the association is as prepared as it possibly can be, and work with your industry professionals, pre-storm, again, doing the preventive maintenance, post-storm, your landscapers, your pool individuals, folks that are going to be able to work with you to go ahead and do the cleanup, make sure that it's all set in place. And to your point, make sure that the professionals that you're working with are true professionals, folks that you have a relationship with, folks that you have good experiences with in the past, because in times of crisis, sometimes there are people that become unreliable. So make sure that the vendors you're working with are true professionals and leaders in the industry.
No, I think it's all solid, Ray. Obviously, it's really, really important. Communication, you stressed it. We stress it all the time as well. And I know, Gregg talks about it, making sure that everyone's on the same page. And the owner app that's all it's all about. And I think it's important that we continue to echo that and make sure that that's become part of the preparedness, is stressing the importance of the communication. How are you going to communicate? What goes out to unit owners before, during, and after a loss? What does the letter look like, rather than trying to draft it from scratch and where you're scrambling to try to get access to units because you didn't even confirm whether or not you have the right phone numbers or keys to get into the different units. And particularly right now, Ray, with the CDC and the protocols and the concern regarding COVID and the pandemic, is there anything that's changing the way that managers or your managers are preparing this year as opposed to any other prior years?
Preparation pretty much remains the same, right? I mean, in terms of, doing the proper planning, making sure that you know exactly what you need to do in the event of an emergency. And emergencies happen all the time. It's not just hurricanes, right? Whether it's fire, whether it's flood, you need to make sure that you have a plan in place in the event that those things do occur. So, in terms of obviously the CDC and COVID and the pandemic that we kind of find ourselves in, hasn't changed a whole lot in terms of our preparation. The reality is we still need to make sure that we have everything that we need to weather whatever emergency comes our way, and communication is still vital. So yes, in terms of everybody being able to get together and huddling up, and obviously we're still keeping our distance and making sure we're cautious, but still preparing the same way we've always been.
Awesome. All right.
If I may add something there,
yeah, go ahead.
So something we're starting to see, which is pretty unique, is that because of COVID and associations having to scramble really back then a year ago to provide notices in an official way and leveraging technology to do so. So you couldn't have the regular annual meeting where all the members would show up. So you had to kind of figure out a plan to do something about it. Now we're seeing associations are better prepared for these type of emergencies, because if I already leverage the system to notify 200, 300 people about a next coming meeting, well, guess what? I have that database already set up. They're in place. Many times they already opted in and provided their latest contact information. So just the fact that these technologies are leveraging, for other things, is going to help us when the catastrophe hits. Because at the end of the day, and I said this already, the day that the storm hits, even the day before, you're a little bit too late. People don't know what to be on the lookout for. They don't know what the emails look like. They don't know what the text messages are. But if you're using this for other stuff, there's a members meeting, or there's simple things like there's a barbecue this weekend. By the time that you need to communicate for an emergency, people know their way around the systems. And I think that's important as well, not catching people blindsided the day of or the day after the event.
And I'll go points. And I know that right now, Owner App is building out this platform to qualify contractors and do different things like that. So I want to talk to you, Greg, because we get a lot of questions about, hey man, do you know the contact information of a qualified roofer? There's a lot of conversation about that and preparing for the storm and then dealing with any disaster or damages. How do you qualify a contractor for, and a roofer, include them in one sentence? And how do you know you have the right people that are going to be able to help you if there's a disaster? What are you looking for as an association?
Well, I think that one of the best things you can ever do is visit your contractor in his location and find out, is that a real contractor? Do they have their own equipment? Do they have their own people? Or is it just a shell of an organization with a fancy website and really all hat and no cattle? So, I would encourage you to go visit and establish a relationship. People think, okay, Greg's in the roofing business. He's got to just love it when a hurricane hits. I mean, think all that business he can do and everything like that. And in reality, it's my worst nightmare, because it'd be like if you were a dentist and every client that you'd ever worked with comes to your office at the same time with a toothache. And it's like, who do you pick? What do you do? And the other thing that people don't realize is our workforce was impacted also. So a lot of times, it's a while before you get back. So, I mean, understanding who you're working with and finding out if there's some substance behind them. Do they have the equipment? Do they actually have the employees that they can attract and actually respond? One of the things that happens right after a storm is people have a tough time realizing things don't move quite as fast as they did prior to the storm. The first thing is everybody's got to just kind of regroup as a company and as an organization and get back to a point where you can go out and mobilize and work with somebody. So and having an established relationship with a contractor, because what we do as contractors after a storm, we're going to service the people that have been our main clients first. And there's just so much labor, so much material that goes around. And when I talk about material right now, I have never been so concerned as I am right now because of the supply chain challenges that we're having. We're getting contracts today, and we're being told that we won't see material until July of next year. And that's how serious it is. And I can't even imagine what it's like up in Louisiana when they were hit by this storm a couple of weeks ago, how devastating that is, because the contractors don't have materials that they can go back. And Dan, I'm sure that you're running into this. I'm sure you're up there in that area working with them right now. And it's a challenge like I've never seen before.
And it's a tremendous challenge, and it's one that it's hard to plan for. So in order to pay for all this, most of our associations are going to rely on insurance, right? So, and we want to make sure that there's the only way to prepare yourself for it is to make sure you have the actual policy you need. And that is a certified copy of the policy. You need to request that from your broker. That policy is your only way to guarantee you have the policy that was sold to you. And it's a bit of information. It's something you need to ask for now, because when the storm hits, it's very difficult to get because it requires the main office or the headquarters of the insurance companies to actually issue it to you. But the reason for that and how it relates to what Greg is saying is that you need to know what you're covered for. You need to know how much coverage you have, and you need to know where the limitations are. Because we did see many claims after Hurricane Irma that received claims of being under the deductible, the amount of damages, or limited or excluded because of wind-driven rain. The wind-driven rain issue has blossomed into much more. It's gone on to become something that's a very hot button issue and something that right now in court is being fought over as it relates to its meaning. What does it mean? Since when was hurricane damage something other than hurricanes? Well, they have now carved it out and perfected their forms. Make sure that you understand where that form, if that form exists, and where it is in your policy and what it limits you to and what you might not be covered for. Because all the pre-storm inspections we talked earlier about Gregg with are going to become very important to doing those things and making sure you have it. But getting the policy itself is one thing, but making sure you review it is something else. Making sure that you understand what those limitations are. I know you went through the process of getting the policy and you worked with your broker and you think you have what you need, but now's the time to check that, because as soon as you're in that cone, you can't do anything about it, but now you can when we don't have a storm actually threatening our coastline. So take the time to get the certified copy of the policy and start asking questions about the coverages. That should be part of your preparedness. It's really, really important. And a lot of that is on the manager, making sure that the manager can actually get this and making sure that the manager knows who to make that request from. So I want to throw back and talk a little bit about Castle's preparation and how they, as a corporation, are helping their managers, deal with communication. One of the questions that was just recently asked to me is that some of my unit owners don't want me to have access to their units. And as part of preparation, we have to deal with this situation because maybe there's a balcony where the balcony railing blew off and we need to get into their unit, but we've been told we're not allowed to access it. Are you dealing with the situation? What is your advice to these these associations now and dealing with these unit owners to prepare for dealing with this type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, that has come up, obviously, to your point, that's part of the current pandemic and COVID and people obviously being really weary about who's entering their unit, coming in and out. Listen, I think the association has a responsibility to mitigate, right? Ultimately, it has a responsibility to all unit owners to make sure it's doing whatever it needs to do to make sure that the building is safe, that the residents are safe. And so, we have certain authorities as an association to be able to go in to address these issues. I think it's really working with the homeowner. If there's a concern, if there's an issue in terms of being able to go into their unit to address a situation, trying to have proper communication with them, give them a comfort level, explain the reasons as to why it's necessary to be able to enter a unit to address a certain situation and how it's really meant to protect them and the rest of the community and their neighbors. So, really just open lines of communication with the individual and trying to get them to understand the reasons and give them the comfort level to allow us to be able to do our jobs.
Yeah, we've been trying to find a middle around where, okay, if I do this, is that okay? Walk through the process and almost just, walk through it, right? Just, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then a little bit of transparency. These are the steps we're going to take, and everything else and work through it. That was my advice. It was a little bit tough. They were this one particular association, elderly community, and they're very concerned about access and people being in and out. And when you do these insurance inspections, I know when you suffer a loss, there could be a dozen professionals going in and out of every single unit. So it's something you should plan for. It's something you should be cognizant of. But these inspections that you do when you have damages are similar to the inspections you should be doing before you even suffer them, making sure that you walk around the property. That's important to document it. Photograph the different parts of your property, whether it be the roof or the interior of units or the balcony areas. However much you can document the current condition of your property prior to the storm happening is going to be very, very important, not only to the speed at which you can recover, but also the outcome of any sort of insurance claim you make. Also, too, when it comes to being restricted access to units, maybe you cannot get access now to take a picture from the inside of what the interior of the unit is, and maybe the unit owner can send you pictures. So maybe you don't have to go into the property. There's just things you can kind of think through, but if you do it now in a controlled environment where you ask them, hey, can you please leave the unit so then we can go in there and these are the people that are going to go in there, it may lead to more tentable situations so that you're not dealing with it. Chad, I want to ask you a question about dewatering because it does come up quite a bit, particularly with a lot of this flooding that we're seeing, flash flooding and stuff like that. And we just recently had a loss in the Edgewater area where they had to do a lot of dewatering. How are you handling dewatering? What are some of the concerns and issues that an association should consider? Because you can't just pump this water just onto your neighbor's property, right? Right. So what should, and by the way, most of this dewatering activity is not covered by insurance. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for this, because this is something that you should be reserving for. And it can be very costly if there's oil and contaminants in it, right? So Chad, walk us through the process. What are some of the concerns? What are some of the things the association should be considering?
Yeah, obviously, when you have a flood event or you need some significant dewatering for access to the property, even there's a lot of factors out there that a lot, the layman may not even consider. Primarily, it's where are you going to pump the water? Is it legal to pump it there? And are you just basically pumping it to an area that's as high in elevation, in effect, just reflooding your own property by pumping it to one location only for it to circle around? I mean, water levels are very simple to understand. If you've got an elevation 14 here and you're pumping it to an elevation 14.5, it's going to make it back onto your property. It's just kind of a circular flow. So you've got to know where downstream is. What does it look like? Acquire the proper permits. There's a lot of times if it does have oil and contaminants, or say a grease trap has potentially been flooded, you've got to get a holding tank. And you've got to pump that water and haul it off site to be disposed of in an environmentally friendly fashion. You can get into serious environmental trouble with DEP if you don't follow a lot of the basic standards and rules that go along with dewatering a surface. So, and when it comes to those tanks, a lot of times, if your tanks are flooded, you get environmental phase 1, environmental phase 2. You get into a lot of, regulatory measures. So again, bottom line is we have low-lying properties. Unfortunately, it's what happens. In instances of emergencies, they're a little bit more lax. But yeah, you can't just pump into your neighbor's property. You can't just pump into. The best way to do it, and the way that I've always done it, is your water on the property eventually goes into public right-of-way. Okay, whether it's dealt through a pond or a storm sewer system that empties out into a ditch after some sort of detention, it goes into public right-of-way. Public right-of-way is meant to capture all of that storm water that falls onto your roof, falls onto your parking lot, falls onto your neighbor's property. Okay, find the easiest and most effective way to pump into public right-of-way and let it move on downstream into either a canal, a river, a stream, whatever the body of water is collecting there.
Yeah, no, great information. And I know this whole dewatering thing has become quite the social media topic these days with these construction sites who seem to be dewatering into our bays and everything else. So it's getting a lot of attention. So as a community association, make sure you're taking the right steps to protect the environment, but also obviously your property. So you have to dewater, but just do it the right way. I even know that if you dewater and there's certain contaminants in it, you could possibly face not only fines, but also jail time. So it's really, really wrong. Chad, you're going to add something?
Yeah, I was going to add. So when you talk about a site that's under construction, certainly a lot of the projects that I deal with are already stable. Okay, they've already got pavement, they've already got grass cover. You don't have a lot of those stormwater contaminants that we talk about, silts and siltation and things like from these large construction sites that are right on the bay. Unfortunately, with the rains that we've had, if those civil engineer by trade, tree hugger by birth, if you're not making if you're contractor, if you have, say you're making an expansion to your property or you're building a new property, you have a bunch of open earthen ground, you're supposed to have a lot of primary and secondary best management practices set up: silt fences, inlet protection, downstream protection, straw wattles, all of these things. And what they're basically meant to do is filter out all of that sediment and silt that's from the exposed earth that they're moving around building foundations or building slabs on these building streets and roadways on these new construction sites, so that when the water does find its exit point into the bay or into the creek that's nearby, it's clean and it's filtered. And a lot of times the contractor will either open up too much ground, which is what we saw a couple weeks ago right on Biscayne Bay. They weren't inspecting their BMPs, and then they had this major rainfall event that failed their already failing BMPs, and they let a tremendous discharge. And yes, the owner of that company got fined $10,000 a day until he cleaned that up.
Yep.
And it's a lot harder to contain it and control it once it's in the body of water than it is prior to entering the body of water.
And with so many of our community associations on seawalls in the coastal areas by, maybe a lake or a canal, whatever it may be. It's so important that you consider this. And maybe you have an ongoing landscaping project, things like that, and your land is not stable. Think of this, okay? You don't have to be in a construction job site to take into consideration what may happen where the sod that you tore up on the side of your building no longer is going to retain that dirt. It's something you should be considering or thinking about as you're doing improvement projects and doing stuff. So speaking of improvement projects, Greg, I want to throw back to you and ask you a question about ongoing construction projects. A question I just got posed to me just recently. They didn't do such a good job of negotiating any delays in their construction project, but are there some things that associations should be considering if they're maybe going through a roofing project right now in the midst of a hurricane season? What should they be looking for and what should they be asking of their contractor to make sure that they're prepared in the event that something happens? Because I can only imagine if your roof is torn off, you're pretty exposed and a tarp is only going to last so long. So what should they be looking for and what questions should they be asking? You muted yourself there, Greg. We'll get you
Okay,
back.
how about
There you
that?
are.
All right.
I gotcha.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I have never felt more vulnerable than this year because of the lack of supplies. I mean, if you were to go to any roofing wholesaler in this community right now, you're going to see basically an empty warehouse. And this, the raw materials that it takes to manufacture roofing products are in short supply. What ended up happening during COVID was factories shut down and inventories weren't made. And usually here in the United States, a lot of those factories are in the northern climates where there's not a lot of work done. Well, when the factories got shut down, they weren't able to build up that inventory to be able to service during hurricane season and just the normal summer season. So we have a countrywide pandemic of our own when it comes to just supplies. Like I said, there's not a roofing contractor right now that has a surplus of material that they can use to go in and help somebody. So now we probably have more than most, and we have a lot of repairs and temporary things that we could do to isolated areas. But the thought of like 100,000 square foot building, just forget it. There's just not that kind of product available for anybody right now. And I hate to be that bearer of this bad news, but that is the reality of what this industry is going through right now.
So asking your contractor, making sure they have the supplies, materials, they're staging their stuff properly. I got to imagine is so important. And there's questions about, tarping. Well, tarping a flat roof basically is above ground pool. So, be careful with those things. Just because the tarp is there, sometimes it's like a false sense of security. It really doesn't. It's actually more harmful sometimes than just leaving it exposed. So, no, definitely. What, Greg, you're going to add?
No, I just, you sit here and I wish I could bring some wisdom or something to the conversation. But the reality of the roofing industry right now is that materials are in such short supply. We're having to get creative and go outside of our market. I'm actually buying some fasteners from England right now because there's no fasteners here in the United States. So, we're all having to get real creative in order to try to service our clients.
No, absolutely. So I guess if you're starting a project or in the midst of a project, checking to make sure that your contractor has supplies, I think it's the overriding advice there. I think that's definitely some key advice, checking to make sure they have it. So if you've paid already for it, making sure that it's actually that it landed on your property or is sitting in a warehouse, and go check it. Go check out that warehouse. I've done it myself for jobs where I didn't trust the contractor. Oh yeah, don't worry, we're stored for you. And I'm like, well, can you send me a picture of it? Where's the warehouse? Going and checking it, making sure it's actually there and that it's tagged for you. So, and they do typically in these supply yards tag the job on the actual supplies. So you can pretty much verify whether or not that supply is going to your actual building. So definitely all sound advice. So Alan, we've been talking a lot about, we've heard some talk about communication. We've talked about, the management aspect of it. When it comes to technology and, and there's what are we doing? And there's a lack of ability, and let's say a lack of electricity, or the phones aren't working. What should we be doing as an association in that regard if we're relying on a technology like Owner App?
Sure, sure. So think about this. Communications is not only emails and text messages. Communications and in technology is also a lot of other things. So we've been discussing here documents and having access to those documents. What happens if the office is underwater? How are people going to have access to those association records? Some of those things don't change, right? So we have to have those documents be available online. I think that's really, really important. It was breezed upon a few minutes ago as well, but we talked about approved vendors. What happens if the association is struggling to operate because they're dealing with big stuff and you need to do some fixes on your units? You can't just throw protocol out the window and bring anyone you want. So the fact that we have access to some contractors that have already worked within the association, they're approved vendors of the association, and your community can easily get access to who they are and not have to go through the whole process of registering them, I think it's going to be a big deal as well. Again, think about this. When we're talking about after these catastrophes, minutes matter. And if you're spending 2 to 3 days trying to register a contractor to come in and help you out with your unit, that's going to be a big problem. At the end of the day, what we want, and I think we can all agree here, is that if the community is online, you're not dependent on one single source for information. How many times were you expecting, for example, the manager to give you a call, or maybe the lines are offline, or the manager to send you an email, but the manager is dealing with something of his own. Maybe they're dealing with their own personal issues. They're not fully operational. So having a community itself be online, I think it's critical. If your neighbor can tell you, guys, come back to the building, we have electricity, we have Wi-Fi's back. If we really have a sense of community and neighbors can help each other out, I think that's really, really important. I strongly believe that when communities thrive is because strangers begin to act as neighbors, and they're not going to act as true neighbors if they're totally disenfranchised and disconnected. So we bring it back to that sense of community, have a news feed, an internal news feed where people can communicate amongst themselves, a private one, so we're not exposing, association matters to everyone. Have access to those documents, make sure that you can leverage and access those documents no matter where you are. At the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're not depending on a server or a computer running in the property manager office. It has to be software that's running in the cloud. It has to be readily available for anyone to connect no matter where they are. And that's when you can start getting a better sense of community and really having one that is prepared to deal with these type of tragedies. So again, for us, it's been really interesting to see how much better prepared our customers are today to deal with something like this than a year or 2 years ago when they relied on analog processes to manage the community. The fact that COVID hit, the fact that we were taking out of our comfort zone and made us rethink the way we engage with our residents, I strongly believe has put us in a better position to manage these type of situations in the future.
I think all good. I think the big takeaway there is that while the technology may not function as it should because you have no electricity, you have no cell towers, the fact is that if you properly prepared up front using it and leveraging that technology, it'll avoid a lot of the delays and everything else when you're in the analog process during that short, brief time. And I can tell you that being on the front lines in the more recent storms, cell towers are being temporarily erected everywhere. It's almost as important, it seems, as clean water for a lot of the damaged areas. And it has a lot to do with the actual first responders. But you're seeing the public sector, AT&T, the Sprints, everything else all get run down there. You used to only see like one of them, right? It was like Sprint or AT&T or T-Mobile. But now it seems like they all jointly go in there because they're all utilizing a lot of the same areas and services. So definitely. And so I think the technology is actually going to come back online a lot sooner. So I think you're going to see a lot less delay. But I think the big takeaway from what Alan has to say is just the idea of doing it more upfront, preparing, kind of the title list, is going to lead to that. Well, gentlemen, it's been awesome to have this conversation with all you and talk about it. I want to leave on closing remarks. Ray, I want to start out with you, talk about the big tip of the day. What is the one takeaway our attendees should leave here remembering and thinking about as they prepare for this storm season?
I mean, the biggest tip that I can give anyone is be proactive. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're being reactive because you didn't properly plan, because you didn't take into consideration. Be proactive, make sure you have a plan in place. Make sure you obviously work with your industry professionals. I can't harp on that enough, how important it is to have folks like ONR and Best Roofing and DMI working together, making sure that we have a plan in place, whether it's preventive, whether it's post emergency, post storm, and just communication with your board, with your residents, with your vendors. That's the most important key.
All good points, all good points. And I've worked with Castle and its team after many storms in the last 14 years or so. I know you guys have you are very prepared at your property. So, and if you're a board member, go down to the office, see, look at the handbooks they put together. It's impressive. It's worth the time. Gregg.
Like I referenced before, make sure you have a relationship with somebody. When a storm hits, every vendor is going to be working to help the people that they've been working with in the past, that they have an ongoing relationship with. So take the time and invest in a relationship with certain vendors, your critical vendors, to make sure that you have a resource that can respond when you call.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Chad.
Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, echoing what Gregg said, first and foremost, develop relationships. We are obviously going to prioritize to the people that we know are loyal to us, and we're going to make sure that we clear out those properties first and foremost. So yeah, absolutely plan on that. Use reputable guys. I agree with him wholeheartedly. Come and visit our yard. Come and see the chainsaws, come and see the heavy equipment, come and see the 2-3 yard loaders I got sitting right out front here, and realize that, you're going to make a call and then you're going to have our people doing the work for you. You're not going to be making a call and then us making 17 other calls to try to find out where to haul off and load and dump all your debris. One thing on the parking lots I did want to mention, it's very important. If you are undergoing a project and you have barricades of any sort on site, make sure that your contractor is being proactive. If they're not, you're going to have to dump those barricades down. They will turn into projectiles and they will fly across the property and damage anything in their path. They weigh about 35 pounds a piece. They're very jagged steel edge. They're very gnarly. They're not to be messed with. So if you have barricades on site, your contractor should be going around and, at least 5 days prior to the hurricane, if not before, to get those off site. If not, bite the bullet and at least put them down as you would anything else in preparation. Other than that, I just want to say, we always hope that we don't have these type of events, and we always hope that we have sunny skies and we don't have to face it. But the fact of the matter is, and the law of the land states down here, that it's just not a matter of if, but when. And so, be prepared, understand what the risk is by doing the do nothing effect, and realize that by taking the preventative measures that we've talked about here today, and the things that really just make common sense, you're going to be less susceptible to major problems in the long run. So thank you very much for hosting GlobalPro. I love this panel. I love doing these things with you guys, and I hope to see you all out there in another time soon.
The feeling is mutual. And again, definitely echoing Gregg and Chad, go visit offices. I mean, we welcome you guys at our office. I know Castle and Ray's team would definitely welcome you to visit them there, to look at the operation. They're all impressive. I've been to each of their offices, and it's definitely worth doing. It's amazing the amount that you learn by just being on site in their place of business and seeing how they operate. Then you get a sense of what it's going to take with you have something and they're servicing you. You have that assurance that they have the resources to be able to do these things. It's not some fly-by-night company. These companies have been around for a long time that are doing great things. So I encourage you all to do that stuff. I couldn't imagine that. And last but not least, Alan, go ahead. Give us your last remarks here, your big tip of the day.
Thanks so much, Dan. So I guess I'll finish with what I started, to be honest. And that is that a digital community is going to be in a better position to weather these storms. Start early. Work with someone that knows communities. It's not about opening up a Dropbox and sending text messages and having 10 million different systems. It's about having one single consolidated experience for your residents. They know where to go to communicate with the association. We're happy to work with any community that needs our assistance here. We work primarily and only with associations. We don't service hospitals, we don't service schools. for us, it's all about helping communities digitally transform. And if we are able to do that with your community and we can help you out, that's fantastic. That would be my biggest advice. Start early. Usually these things take time. There's going to be a first 20, 30% of the community that are very eager. They're going to jump on it right away. And it's going to take some time to get the entire community on board. And the more time you have and the more you point them towards there, the better off you're going to be when the storm does hit. So thanks again, Dan, for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for my fellow panelists. I learned a lot today as well. I'm involved in my community, so I'll make sure to give you a call.
I appreciate it, guys. This has been awesome. My big tip of the day, and something I've been saying a lot, is transparency. I think transparency is in everything, including the preparation. You heard me talk about it earlier. I'll say it again. Involve your fellow unit owners, your board members, as well as your managers and other vendors in your plan. Show them the plan. Walk through the plan. Like we talked about, just simple things as access to the unit. Get access early, making sure that you can document the conditions of the property, super important. And I mentioned the certified copy of the policy. The first one is almost always free. The second one or third one, if you lose it for whatever reason, may cost you some money, but you can always get the first one. Your insurance company has an obligation to provide it. No matter what your broker says, you should be able to get it. And if you can't, let us know. The experts here want to help you. Certainly want to make sure that you have the policy, have the information you need in order to recover. And part of the recovery process is getting the money that you need in order to rebuild. Don't ever confuse the rebuilding with the recovery. When it comes to insurance, recovery is only about getting money. Rebuilding is how you spend those dollars. So make sure that you understand what it's going to take to recover so that you can rebuild. Make sure you can rebuild quickly. We talked about a lot of things that may impact your ability to rebuild today. Gregg harped on this issue regarding the materials themselves. Labor, he mentioned it. I know we're all feeling it in all of our industries. So know that the labor force is thin. The materials are being distributed all over the world. As you heard, Gregg has reached out to Europe to try to get fasteners for roofs. These are things that are going on. These are real things that may impact your ability to rebuild once you have recovered the money you're entitled to. So, well, I want to thank all of our attendees. I want to thank my fellow panelists. This has been awesome. I apologize. There might have been a little issue with the link, and it hurt some of the attendees, and we received some emails on it. But it was a great panel. We recorded it. We're going to make sure it gets redistributed, obviously, to our entire contact database, as well as all of the panelists and their companies. Our contact information is right there in the chat. Make sure that you cut and paste it. Obviously, you have the emails. You can shoot us an email, call us. Any one of us will take the time to walk you through and help you with your preparedness. I know there's been a lot of focus on the 40 recertification, but we can't forget to be prepared for hurricanes, for the unexpected, because as you heard from Chad, it's not a matter of if, it's just when. So we want to make sure that we are prepared for that, and using technology, making sure you have professional management, having qualified contractors such as Best Roofing, and the team over at DMI is all that important. So again, thank you to all of my panelists. Thank you for all of our attendees that have joined us here today. And we wish you the best of luck. And if there's anything that any one of us can do to help you, please let us know.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.